it is in Washington, D.C. Uh,
One,
People tell me it's gone back to sort of 1936, but no, don't be disparaging. It's a children's show, so that's okay.
I have
Well,
one.
we got a wonderful, we've got the wonderful, the incredible, the amazing, uh one of the queen of Irish storytelling, and then has done so much for storytelling across the whole of Ireland and the UK, that she was awarded an MBE for her services to storytelling, and well deserved it is. And so, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, an assembled company, can you welcome and give a huge round of applause to the amazing Liz Weir?
Thank you very much. Thanks very much indeed, John. You're coming live from my living room. There is a cat running about here somewhere. He may well put in an appearance. But tonight I thought I'd share some of my favourite stories for children. And I'm hoping you grown-ups won't mind too much. Some you probably know, some you maybe don't know. But I love sharing stories for children. I was in a school last week in Dublin, and they seem to like these stories. So we'll see how you get on as well. Some of them are from books that I've written. Some are fairly well-known stories, but we'll see how it goes. The first story I want to tell you is a story that I started telling in the 1970s probably. There was a very famous storytelling book called The Way of the Storyteller. And I looked up some stories from that. And one of the stories in it was one that I will tell you now. It's next month is March. And on the 17th of March, we have St. Patrick's Day. And of course, on St. Patrick's Day, well, I think people outside Ireland celebrate more than people inside Ireland do. But obviously, it's a famous St. Patrick's Day named after our saint, who wasn't actually Irish. He came across from Wales. But I'm going to tell you a favourite story of mine that's commonly told in England as well, many different versions. I've even got a picture book version, which is totally different. I want to take you to County Roscommon, to the town of Ballahadreen. And outside that town, there was a small, quiet, rural crossroads. And at that crossroads, there stood a thatched cottage, just a one-room cottage. At the front of the cottage, there was a cherry tree. At the back, the man of the house planted some fruit and vegetables. And the owner of that house was a peddler. Nowadays, you might have heard of like travelling shops that go around, even when I was a child. But the peddler would trek around with his pack on his back, selling his wares. And you know, that cottage that he lived in was his pride and joy. It was small, but it was home. But the neighbours would laugh at him and say, "Peddler, do you not see the birds coming down, pecking the cherries off the cherry tree? Do you not even see the rabbits and hares coming to eat all the vegetables in your garden?" And the peddler would smile and say, "Oh no, the birds reward me with their sweet music. And what better company is a lonely man in the evenings than those rabbits and hares?" And the people would shake their heads and think, someday he's not going to have any money. And when it came to his business, he was no better. He would go to a market and he'd lay out his wares, and a small boy might come and pick up maybe a spinning top and say, "How much is that?" And the peddler would say, "A penny." The boy would shake his head. He said, "Listen, take it, take it." Or a girl might come and touch a lovely red ribbon and say, "How much is this ribbon?" "A halfpenny." "I don't have it. Listen, take it with you. I'll see you again. And sure, that ribbon will look better in your nice hair than in my pack here." And again, all the neighbours and friends would say, "Oh, peddler, there'll come a day when you're not going to have any money." And sadly, that day did come. The day came when the peddler had no money and no food. And so he went to bed hungry. And hungry people are wont to dream. And that night he had a dream. He dreamt that St. Patrick himself came to him and said, "Peddler, peddler of Ballahadreen, take the road to Dublin town, find the halfpenny bridge that crosses the River Liffey, stand there and you'll hear what you're meant to hear." Peddler thought, what a silly dream. But you know, he had the same dream the next night and the same dream the next night. And he thought, well, I might as well go and die in Dublin as die of hunger here. And it's a very long way to Dublin. And he made his way hobbling along until he came to the famous Halfpenny Bridge. And he stood there all day long. in his tattered clothes, crowds passing him by, nobody looking at him. And as the sun went down and the chill got into his bones, he decided to find somewhere just to lie down and sleep and, maybe even die. But as he came off the bridge, he heard a voice say, "Here, over here." And it was a tavern. At the door of the tavern, there was the innkeeper who said, "I've been watching you there all day long. What are you doing standing there? Come in and get yourself a bowl of warm soup." He was very grateful. And the innkeeper brought him in and set him down at a scrubbed table and set a bowl of broth in front of him. And the peddler was supping the hot soup. He was very glad of it. And he said, "Well, you're very kind, but for the last 3 nights I've had a dream." "Ha! Dream? Don't talk to me about dreams," said the innkeeper. "Do you know, for the last 3 nights I have had a dream. I dreamt that St. Patrick himself came to me," said innkeeper. "Take the road to Ballahadreen in County Roscommon. There at the crossroads you'll find a cottage. At the front of that cottage there's a cherry tree. Dig under that tree and you'll find what you're meant to find." Well, when the peddler heard that, he couldn't eat the soup fast enough. And he went back up the road home faster than he came down it. And quickly he got a spade and started to dig under the cherry tree at the front of his cottage, and clang! Hit metal, and he pulled out a chest. And when he opened that chest, it was full of gold, wonderful gold. And he took that gold, and he was a modest man. He didn't need much. He kept a few coins for himself, but he distributed the rest to all of the people around that village. And they say that when he died, they built a statue by the side of the road, the peddler of Ballahadreen, with a pack on his back and a dog at his heels. And that's the story. English storytellers will know it as the Peddler of Swaffham. And there's many. I even have a picture book version called The Peddler of Ballymena. Now, Ballymena is my hometown. And honestly, although St. Patrick came as a slave to the mountain close to where I live, I don't think the peddler was ever set in Ballymena. It just shows you. It's called Grown-Up's Poetic License, anyway. So I hope you like that story. It's one of my favourites. It's always brought out for St. Patrick's Day. I really like them. Oh, I'm looking around the screen at all these grown-ups. Don't see many children here. There's Alistair and Omar and Norman and all my friends around. It's lovely to see you all. So I thought I'd tell a story. I have a couple of children's books, one called Here, There and Everywhere, Stories from Many Lands. Now, obviously, when talking about naming books, this was named after a Beatles song, which some of you could maybe sing. But I'm going to tell you one of my favourite stories in the book. I have a great friend who lives in, part-time in Colorado and part-time in Connecticut. Her name is Maura Clare. And I've always been sort of known as a do the right thing sort of person. Maura would do things that I wouldn't always do. And so when she heard this story about 2 girls called Mary and Bridget, I very soon became Mary and she was Bridget. In fact, she would sometimes call me Mary because Mary always does the right thing. So a long time ago, on the west coast of Ireland, there lived 2 girls. One, Mary, who was, she always did what she was told. If her mother said, "Come back for 6 o'clock," she'd be back at 5:45. If her mother said, "Why don't you wear your pink dress?" she'd wear a pink dress. But her best friend was Bridget, and Bridget was oh so different. If Bridget's mother said, "Come back at 6," Bridget might come back at 6:15 at the earliest. Or if her mother would say, "Why don't you wear that pretty blue dress?" Well, Bridget will wear a green dress. That's just the sort of person. And yet, they were still very good friends. Friends can be different and still be good friends. The 2 of them used to go down and play by the seashore. And at the seashore, they'd be in and out of rock pools. They had an old net that they'd try and scoop up crabs and so on. But one day, they were playing down by the shore. And Mary noticed the sun going down. She said, "Come on, Bridget. Time we were going home." "No, I don't want to go home yet." "Would you come on? I'm not going to get into trouble over you." And the 2 of them started walking up the cliff path from the beach. And as they walked up, all of a sudden it was Mary said, "Shh, listen. Can you hear it? Thought we had to hurry. Listen." And they stopped and they listened and they heard the most beautiful singing. Wonder what that is. Thought you were in a hurry. But they peered through the rocks, and there before them they saw a lady with long hair right down her back. The dress she had on her was all the colours of the sea, blue and green and silver and grey. She had seashells around her hair, she had seaweed around her neck, and when they looked, she didn't have legs, she had a tail, because this was a mermaid. "You've a lovely voice, so you have," said Mary. Oh, the mermaid jumped. She wasn't used to people talking to her and being nice to her. She was used to people trying to steal her away. "Oh, thank you," she said. And she sang more songs. She sang songs of shipwreck, songs of rescue, happy songs and sad songs. And as the sun was going down, they noticed something glinting in her lap. And when they looked, in her lap, she had pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, earrings and brooches and bracelets, all the treasures of the sea. And she said, "Girls, I'd like to give you a present." And she lifted up 2 bags of spun silver thread, and into each she put pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, one for Mary, pearls, rubies, diamonds, emeralds, one for Bridget. She said, "Now, girls, these gifts must be shared with your whole family. Do not stop on the way home, because sharing is very important." "Thank you," said Mary. "No, thanks," said Bridget. And off they set home. Well, when they set off for home, halfway home, it was Bridget who stopped. "There's nothing in my bag. My bag's empty." "Look, would you come on?" She said not to stop. "I'm going to look. There's nothing in it." Right enough, the bag seemed light. Bridget tipped up her bag, and out came a stream of silver sand. "Ha! Told you it was a trick. Open your bag." But do you think that Mary opened her bag? No, you know better. Definitely, Mike, you know better. She wasn't going to open her bag. She ran for home. She ran into her house. Round the kitchen table was her mother, her grandmother, her little brother, her big sister, and she tipped out the bag onto the table, and out came pearls and rubies and diamonds and emeralds, and she told the story just the way I'm telling all you people that are listening. And she said that it must be shared with their family. So they decided that since her daddy was a fisherman, he was out at sea with his brothers, they would use the money to buy a new boat for him. And that's what they did. And with that new boat, they brought in all the bounteous catch of the sea. And then they sold that fishing boat, and they built a restaurant high up on the cliff top. And there they sold all the seafood that the local fishermen would bring in. And they called that restaurant the Mermaid's Gift, for that was what it had been. And that's the story. And I hope you liked it. It's one of my favourites. And any boys and girls that are listening, I don't know if we have any, but maybe they'll listen and catch up. It's a lovely story to do pictures from. I've had beautiful pictures. Some people think the mermaid's hair was green. Some people think it's golden, all sorts of different colours. So I really love that story. And actually, I want to tell all you adults listening where I got that story. I was away over in California a long time ago, Santa Rosa, and I was staying with a great storyteller called Catherine Fairley. And she had got that story in Ireland. She took it to America, and then I brought it back to Ireland. Sadly, we lost Catherine a few years ago. She'd come to visit me here in Ireland, and I always tell that story in her memory, because that's the thing about stories. If somebody gives you a story as a gift, you have to remember them, and you have to think about them. In fact, that book, Here, There, and Everywhere, is dedicated to the memory of a wonderful storyteller, a great storyteller called Nancy DeVries. And Nancy DeVries was a friend of mine who lived in Michigan. We used to go over and stay with her, and then she came over and stayed with me, but sadly she passed away. So the book is a memory of her. And actually I'm going to tell you a story that I got from Nancy that I really love.
Please?
Yes.
Sorry, pardon
Yes,
the
Tina.
interruption. Before you carry on, somebody has accidentally spotlighted Norman. So if people go back to the recording, they will be hearing your voice, but looking at Norman's face. So
Somebody could unspotlight Norman. He's unspotlighted now. How's that? Is that all right, Despina? Thank you for pointing that out. I always go on gallery view so I see lots of people and not just one person. That's very kind of you. So Norman, it's going to be like a ventriloquist act. You're going to be there and my voice is coming, so that'll be interesting. Anyway, the story, thank you, Despina, for pointing that out. The story I want to tell you is one, well, I'll tell you, people say to me, "You're Irish, so you must have grown up hearing stories." And the thing about it is, I didn't hear many traditional folk tales as I was growing up. I certainly didn't hear any Irish stories about Finn McCool or Carol. I have one Finn McCool story. I didn't hear any of those because when we were at school, we learned mostly Scottish history and Scottish stories and English history. It's a very strange thing. Fortunately, that's changed now. But the only local story that I heard, apart from family stories, was the story of Finn McCool fighting the Scottish giant. There are many stories about that. But my favourite one is the one where Finn McCool was fighting with the Scottish giant Benidorm. He scooped up a handful of soil, he threw it over to Scotland, and it missed. And it landed in the middle of the Irish Sea, and it became the Isle of Man, where he scooped up the soil, filled it with water, and that became Lough Neagh, which is the largest freshwater lake in the British Isles. And if you look at any map of Northern Ireland, you'll see Lough Neagh all around. I think 5 counties border it. But I'm going to tell you the story of the fisherman of Lough Neagh. And any of you storytellers listening will know other versions of this story, but this is the version I based on the story Nancy told me, and I hope you like it. There was once a fisherman whose name was Seamus, and he used to take his boat out on Lough Neagh. And when the weather was fine, he got those Lough Neagh eels that are so famous and that are now being shipped all across Switzerland and France and all those places. You can't get an eel in Ireland at all. They're all shipped out. But the problem with Lough Neagh is, it being the biggest lake, that when the weather was bad, it became like a sea and the water would boil up, and it was too dangerous for fishermen to take their boats out. So the only way Seamus could earn money was by going round and chopping wood. And one day, he was freezing cold day, he was chopping wood down by the shores of Lough Neagh. It was very sad because his hand was so cold, he dropped in his axe. And all he could do was cry. What's wrong? Said a voice. And when he looked, there was a tiny boat. And inside the tiny boat was a tiny fisherman. It was a fairy. What's wrong, Seamus? Even knew his name. What's wrong? Said the fairy. I lost my axe. Would you like me to get it for you? Of course, Seamus, being a very polite man, said, yes, please. So the fairy cast out his line. Anybody listening can help. I always get boys and girls to help me. Cast out his fishing line, reeled it back, reeled it back, reeled it back. And there on the end was an axe made of gold. Is this your axe? Oh, no, thanks very much, said Seamus, but no, my axe wasn't made of gold. Silly me. Let's try again. Ready, steady, go. And he reeled it back, reeled it back, reeled it back. And there on the end was an axe made of silver. Is this yours? Oh, thanks very much, but no, mine wasn't made of silver. Third time lucky. 1, 2, 3. When he reeled it back, there was Seamus's old axe. Oh, thank you, said Seamus. Thank you, you're very kind. Do you know what, Seamus, said the fairy? You're a very honest person. Honesty should always be rewarded. And then, bing, there on the bank was a golden axe, a silver axe, and his old axe, and the fairy just disappeared. Well, Seamus was delighted, and he took the gold and silver axes home and sold them for a lot of money, and the word got around. Now, he had a friend called Michael, a wee bit like the girl in the other story. Michael was a wee bit sneaky and a wee bit mean. And Michael heard this and he thought, oh, happy days. He had an old rusty saw, for sawing wood. And he took it. And he looked around, made sure nobody was looking. And then he threw it splash into the water. And then he sat down and did that old pretend crying thing. I'm sure some of you have seen it. There's no point in pretending to cry if people aren't looking at you. So, what's wrong? Said a voice. It's the fairy. He did that old fiffin thing. I don't know what you call it in America, but we call it fiffin. That sort of. He said, what's wrong with you, Michael? Michael said, I lost my saw. Oh, I suppose you'd like me to find it for you, said the fairy. Yes, he said. Didn't even say police. So the fairy got his fishing line, sighed and went, reeled it back, reeled it back, reeled it back. And there was a glistening golden saw. Is this your saw? Yes, that's mine. Indeed, it is not, said the fairy. You know as well as I do, your saw wasn't made of gold. With that, the golden saw, the fisherman, and the boat just vanished into thin air. Seamus and his family lived happily ever after, but of course, Michael had to go and buy himself a brand new saw, and it served him right. So that's a tiny story I tell to little ones. And I love it when they draw me pictures of the fisherman. And of course, the fact that he didn't say please, they absolutely love that story. So I hope you liked it too. So that's your Seamus and Michael and Mary and Bridget, 2 and 2. So the stories that I like best of all to tell to adults as well are stories about enchantment and magic. And so again, one of the stories I've been telling for probably, John, close your ears, for probably 50 years is another story out of that way of the storyteller. And this is one that I put in a little book called Boom Chicka Boom. And Boom Chicka Boom has lots of my favourite stories in it. It's got the riddle story. Now, I know all you storytellers that are listening are so smart, you'll get the riddle easily. But pretend you're about 7, you maybe won't get it so easily. So, of course, the riddle is 2 legs, sat on 3 legs, eating no legs. In came 4 legs, picked up no legs, and ran off. Then 2 legs, picked up 3 legs, threw it after 4 legs, 4 legs dropped, no legs. And the children look at me as if I have 2 heads. But then when you explain to them, it's really quite simple. Who's got 2 legs? Who's got 2 legs, people? Anybody want to talk? A person, Alistair. Sat on 3 legs. What do you sit on? It's got 3 legs. Mike?
Stool.
A stool. Eating no legs. What might you eat that's got no legs? They don't get smart and tell me about snails and things. Think of something more ordinary.
Cheese.
Yes, a fish. Went in, came 4 legs, and who likes fish? Cat. 4 legs picks up no legs. The cat picks up the fish. The man picks up the 3-legged stool, throws it after the cat, and the cat drops the fish. And when they did this book, actually, I objected, but it was too late to object. When they show the picture, they show the man throwing the stool after the cat, and this cat is stars. But in my version of the story, he doesn't hit the cat. No. He just scares the cat. So that's 2 legs sat on 3 legs. And what I love getting children to do it very, very quickly. You know, I wasn't going to tell you this, but some of you know my friend Dan Yashinsky from Toronto. And a long time ago, I think it was Dan that told me this first. Why fire engines are red. Do you all know that? I'll do it very fast. Fire engines are red. Books and magazines are red too. 2 6s are 12. There's 12 inches in a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ship. Ships sail in the sea. Fish swim in the sea. Fish have fins. The fins used to fight the Russians. Fire engines are always rushing, so that's why they're red. Now the children look at me like this. Huh? And then I say, you only have to do it 3 times, and then you have it. So you people who are listening can try it with me. Fill in the bits as you know them. Here comes my cat, Ginger Baker. If you see a tail coming past, it's not mine. Here he comes. Fire engines are red. Books and magazines are red too. 2 6s are 12. 12 inches in a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ship. Ships sail in the sea. Fish swim in the sea. Fish have fins. The Finns used to fight the Russians. The Russians were called the Reds. Fire engines are always Russian, so that's why fire engines are red. I'm going to put one of you up to this, see if you can do it. Was that Evita in from Australia? Great. Anyway, we'll try it one more time. Fire engines are red. Books and magazines are red too. 2 6s are 12. 12 inches in a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ship. Ships sail in the sea. Fish swim in the sea. Fish have fins. Finns used to fight the Russians. Russians were called the Reds. Fire engines are always Russian, so that's why fire engines are red. Anybody want to try it with me? Who wants to try it? Alistair, no. Despina, no. Nobody? Norman, no. Norman's unmuted, I think. Norman, do you want to try it? Have a see? Nobody's going to try it. We'll do it one more time so you get it in your head. And you say, why? Because when I do this, particularly, I love doing this with kids who don't particularly like books and don't particularly like stories, but when they can do this, they feel so good about themselves and they really impress their friends. So I like to do it. So fire engines are red, books and magazines. Oh, who's doing it? Who's going to do it? Is that you, Norman, talking? Who's going to talk? Not one. All right.
Oh, that'd
John,
be
you
me.
going to try it? John. John, try it. Fire engines are?
Fire engines are red. Books and magazines are red too. Two 6s are 12. The
12
12
inches.
inches to a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ruler. Queen Elizabeth was a ship too. So the ships sail on the sea. Fish swim in the sea. Fishes have fins. The Finns were always fighting the Russians. The Russians are Reds. The fire engines are always Russian. So fire engines are red.
Bravo, bravo, bravo. Well done, well done. It's just a bit of nonsense, but it's fun nonsense, you know? And I love doing that. Anyway, where was I? I was going to tell you a story from the book that's got 2 legs and 3 legs in it. And again, it's one of the most commonly known stories, originally from Ruth Sawyer's Way of the Storyteller. I got permission from the publisher to publish my version of it in this book. And my version of, and I think in actually her original version, Meg Barneyleg came from County Fermanagh. County Fermanagh is in the west of Northern Ireland. It's a county full of lakes. And again, usually most of the children I meet from there are nice, but unfortunately Meg wasn't too nice. Wee Meg Barneyleg was an only child, and her parents thought there wasn't a child like her in the country. And she was the most spoilt girl you could imagine. She would say, I don't want, you know, that whiny, horrible voice, awful. And her parents would smile and nod, and the neighbours would go, oh, please don't let that child come to our house. Because if she came to visit you, she was observant. Her parents scolded her. Oh, no, she said, oh, look, Mummy, they've still got the same curtains they had last time. Mummy, there's a big chip out of my cup. And the parents would smile, and the neighbours would go, oh. She was always saying things about people. But the worst thing, as far as I'm concerned, was she teased animals. And one day, the story really gets going when her parents brought her to visit a farm out in the country. And in the yard, there was an old farm dog. And often in farms, they have a big, long lead or a big, long chain so they can lie in the yard without running off. And this dog had been around a few corners, as we would say here. This dog knew this girl from old. And what she used to do was sneak up behind the dog, pull his tail, and then run away. So when the dog tried to get her, the dog was half choked by the chain. So she was just sneaking up, and the dog had his eyes semi-closed like that. And as she got up close to him, he just spun around and gave her just a sharp nip in the leg. She started crying. The parents came running. Some people said, get rid of the dog. Other people said, get rid of the child. And when she heard people starting to say that, she took herself off. She went away up the hill to the hay field where the people were working, bringing in the hay. Now, in the olden days, there were no tractors or combine harvesters. No. They had a horse and cart. They were forking the hay up. And the thing she knew was that these workmen always had their lunch in the cool under the hedge. Now, again, it's not like now where you get plastic boxes and so on. Not at all. They had bread and cheese wrapped up in cloth. They had cold tea, perhaps with a stopper in it. And you know what she did? I'm sure you can guess. She helped herself to everything she wanted to eat. She drank. But the worst thing about it, anything she didn't want to eat, she just wasted. She just threw it out over the grass. And there was a lovely grassy hill, and she was tired. Oh, she fell asleep. When she woke up, she was amazed to see it was dark. It's just a bit of light from the moon. And then she heard whispering voices. Look at that girl's done to our dancing place. Oh, if I could get my hands on that child. What a child. She heard people talking about her. Now, you hear me if you heard somebody talking about you. Wouldn't you have the wit to shut up? Not her. Here I am. Who wants me? And all of a sudden, she was surrounded by little people no bigger than her knee, for she had fallen asleep on a fairy hill. That was it. They joined hands and they started to circle around her. Ring, ring, fairies dance, fairies sing. She won't move a hand or a foot. And the next thing, she was stuck. They pulled up a big tuft of grass and they pulled her down inside the fairy fort. And there, oh dear, they brought her into a room. The first room was full of old, dirty, tattered clothes. They said, do you see that? That's all the clothes that you threw down behind you. Your poor mother was sewing her fingers to the bone, trying to keep you in clothes. You would wear a thing once, you would throw it down. You're not going to get a bite to eat or a sup to drink till you've all that cleared up. What could she do? Again, no washing machines in those days. No, she had to get a big washboard and she had to wash all the clothes. She had to wring them out. She had to hang them over the hedges to dry them. And then there was the ironing. Now, you people know there was no electricity those days. The only way to iron clothes was to heat up the irons in the fire. But as you all probably know, don't put too many irons in the fire at once. And when she had the irons hot, she ironed them and everything looked lovely. She said, can I go home now? No, you can't. And they gave her a cup of milk and a piece of bread. And honestly, she ate it. She was ravenous. She ate it down. It tasted really good. They brought her into a second room. Oh dear, this room again, full of all the stuff that she'd left behind her. She had to clear up and clear up and clear up. I'm going to show a picture of this because what's the point of telling stories to you and having a book here and not showing you a picture? There she is. There she is pulling the dog's tail. Do you see there? She's a pretty horrible girl. Horrible girl. And then we have her here, bringing her in. There's the fairies, the angry fairies around her. Do you see? They brought her into a room. Well, the second room was full of rotten food. There was cabbage stumps. There was mashed potatoes. See that? That's all the good food you have left behind you. Your mother made you lovely meals and you just pushed away. I don't like that. I don't like this. Get it cleared up. And again, all she had was a brush and a shovel. She had to clear it all up. Then she said, can you go home now? No, you can't. And they gave her another cup of milk and another piece of bread and cheese. And honestly, it was tasty. But the third room, this is the third room, was full of spiky weeds and thorns. In amongst the weeds and thorns were some pretty flowers. Pink flower, blue flower, yellow flower. Oh, look, she says. Oh, look. Those flowers are going to be ruined with all those weeds. Glad you noticed the berries. Those weeds are all the horrible, nasty things that you have said about other people. Those horrible cutting words. You won't get anything to eat or drink till you've all that cleared up. And she started weeding. And she weeded till her hands were sore and blistered, but the little flowers looked good. That's better, she said. That looks good. The next thing, bing, she was out, dancing around in the air. Ring, ring, fairy ring. Fairies dance, fairies sing. Now, here's a tip for all of you grown-ups listening. If you ever get taken by the fairies, there's various ways to get home. But one of them is to find a four-leafed clover, like a shamrock with four leaves. And she was so observant, she picked one and she said, I wish I was home in my own house. And bing, there she was, lying in her own bed. Her mother said, glory be, our Meg's back to us again. She said, I'm sorry, Mummy. I didn't mean to tease that dog. He wouldn't have bit me. I teased him. He wouldn't have bit me if I hadn't teased him. And it turns out she'd been lying there asleep for a year and a day. All that time she'd been away with the fairies. Well, to cut a long story short, ever since then she was the nicest child, polite, well-mannered, said please, thank you, did work around the house, cleared up after herself. And if you go down to County Fermanagh, as I do quite often nowadays, and you meet a well-behaved child, you would nearly bet that would be a great-grandchild of wee Meg Barnaleg. So that's Meg Barnaleg and the fairies, and I hope you enjoyed it. And you know, thank you very much. The thing about Ireland is we still say about people, do you see your man there? He's away with the fairies. Because when the fairies took a human boy or a human girl, they left a replica that looked like that person. This is the cat, by the way, who's come to join me. They would leave a replica of that person and they wouldn't speak. But, you know, nowadays we know so much more about medicine that sometimes when people's had a bump in the head or people are unconscious, we know that by sitting beside them and talking to them, perhaps they'll come out of that. And that's where the whole Away with the Fairies things comes from. The fairies would have taken a particularly beautiful child and left a replica. It's called a changeling in its place. So I hope you enjoy this. Now, I'm looking to see. I can't read the chat while I'm doing this. A changeling. You're right, whoever wrote that. I'd have to scroll up and look down. And you know, when I'm telling stories, I have no problem if somebody wants to interrupt and ask me a question in between. Oh, that's Baba C. When I was young enough for a high chair, I was very sick. I was getting, give us a minute. Oh, lovely. Oh, fairies. You saw fairies, Baba C. Lovely. I love reading other people's stories. I was doing a workshop last week, and a lot of people contacted me afterwards and told me stories afterwards as well. And I'm going to tell you one of the stories that I told on that. It's one that you can tell to slightly older children. I was doing a workshop on telling stories to older people and people living with dementia, which I do a lot. And I called the workshop, "Is she still talking?" Which is what people say to me quite often when I'm in nursing homes or day centres, or else they say, "Shut up" or "Go away," which isn't very nice, but I just keep telling stories anyway. So I'm going to tell you this story. I really like it. I lost another good friend just a couple of months ago. Her name was Maggie Kerr Pierce. Maggie Kerr Pierce had grown up in Belfast, Northern Ireland, and she went to Scotland, became quite a famous folk singer, married her husband. She was Maggie Kerr, married her husband Ken, and they moved over to Connecticut in America, or I think it was Connecticut, somewhere up there anyway. And she became well known as a storyteller in America, and she told lovely stories at the National Storytelling Festival. And I was lucky enough to bring her to Belfast, took her to meet the Lord Mayor, took her to her old school, saw the roll book with her name on it and everything. So we were really good friends. But sadly, she passed away at a good age. But she tells a lovely version of this story, and this is my version as well. There was a young man who lived with his elderly father. The two of them, they just got along all right, but the house was, we would say, coming down round them. The house was very untidy. They had two paths worn up to the fire, where two mugs stained with tea sat, and life was pretty poor. And the young man decided he might go out, meet a nice girl, and get married. So he met a lovely young woman, and after months and months of going out together, he proposed. She accepted his proposal. They got married, and he brought her to live in the house with his old father. Oh, the difference that young woman made. She decorated the place. She put her lovely shining delf on the dresser in the living room, and she brought a beautiful hand-woven blanket, which she put over the sofa. Life was good. And then life got even better because they had a baby boy, and they were so delighted to have this child. And the baby started to crawl about. The baby started to talk, say mama and dada, and start sentences. But unfortunately, as the baby was growing bigger, the old man was getting weaker and weaker. He was forgetting things. His memory was going. He was dropping food. He was dropping plates. He was clumsy, and the young man was really, really bad-tempered. And one night, during dinner, the old man broke a plate on the floor. Oh, and the young man just jumped up and said, "That is it. We can't keep him here anymore. He'll have to go out." And sad to tell you, in the olden days, there were no such things as nice residential care homes. If you were put out, you had to maybe go to the workhouse. And his wife jumped up and said, no, you can't put your father out in the road. It's a freezing cold night. You can't put him out. You have to go on the road with her own child to think about now. Well, she said he'll freeze. So she reached for a beautiful hand-woven blanket, and she went to put it round the old man. And as she did so, she said, "That will keep him warm." And her husband snatched and said, no, you can have half a blanket. And he began to tear this lovely blanket in half, when all of a sudden, didn't the little boy speak his first proper sentence? He said, "That's right, Daddy. You keep the other half of that blanket. You'll need that when I put you out onto the road." And when the young man heard that, he realised how foolish he'd been. And he got his father, put his arm round him, sat him down at the table and set up a new plate of food. And that's the story called Half a Blanket. It's one of my favourite stories. It's about being kind to each other and being patient with each other. Thank you, Alistair. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
I love that. I love that version. That you put you put a nice ending in. You know, it was like usually it's like he'll need it when he gets older, but
No, no, no,
and
no.
that's the end. But
Yeah,
I love that bit where you
thank
come
you.
in there and just
Absolutely. You
make it
have
all
to have a bit of
sweet again.
gentleness. Yeah, you do. The older I get, the more I like that version, John, to tell you the truth. But there's a lovely
Yeah,
version.
I know exactly what you
You
mean.
know exactly. You and I have known each other for a very long time, decades and decades. But I have a friend called Stephen O'Hara, who's a really good storyteller. Some of you have even met him. But Stephen, he's the boy that cut down a fairy tree and his hair turned white when he was 19. But that's another story for another day. But Stephen tells a lovely version where, well, the man is quite harsh to his father, and he makes him eat at a separate table, and he gives him a wooden bowl that he can't break. And then when he goes out to his shed, oh, well, there goes my water. Anyway, the cat is just drinking my water. Go away. Anyway, when he goes out to his shed, the little boy's carving some wood. And he says, "What are you doing, son?" He said, "I'm carving you a wooden bowl for when you drop your plates." You know, it's a lovely version of the story. Thank you very much. This is my cat, who's just been drinking the water out of the cup that I have beside me. So I won't be drinking that water in a hurry anyway. So I'm enjoying myself. I hope you're enjoying yourself. Again, Baba C, please do borrow that story. I like stories that do touch the emotions. Years ago, I was telling stories in Indianapolis at the Hoosier Storytelling Festival, and we had lots of school visits, and then we had lots of older visits. And this nun came up to me, and she Irish origin. She said, "I like your stories," and I said, "Thank you very much." She said, "But everybody dies," and I said, "Well, yeah, a lot of my stories people do die, but we're not doing those stories today. We're not doing those ones today. We'll do different ones today." People, I'll tell you another one that I like. And again, there's many versions of this. That's the good thing about storytelling. I believe, and I was talking about this the other day, we should have what I call pocket stories. Stories that you keep in your top pocket or your hip pocket that you can bring out at the drop of a hat. You know, if I organize a lot of storytelling sessions, and I've done it here where I've had visiting storytellers, and I say, "Would you like to tell a story?" And they'll say, "I haven't had time to prepare anything." I said, "For heaven's sake, if you're a storyteller, you should have a story that you can tell anytime. I have no patience." Anyway, so one that a lot of people tell, which I like as well, is about a farmer. A farmer who had 3 sons, and he loved his 3 sons equally. And here in Ireland, I don't know, it's like in other places, mostly the eldest son always gets the farm. And this farmer himself had been done out of the farm because his older brother got it. And his older brother wasn't even a good farmer, but he'd worked and worked himself, and he'd got a lovely farm. And now he had these 3 boys. So he called the 3 boys and he said, "Boys, I am going to give you each equal opportunity to inherit the farm after I've gone. We're going to decide it while I'm still alive." He said, "Any one of you, I want you to fill the house with one thing." And again, many of you know Taffy's version of this. The first boy, his name was John, and he looked around the farm, and the thing they had most of, well, the biggest thing they didn't have tractors, as I said, they had a huge big Shire horse, a big plough horse. And it took him some doing to get it into this tiny cottage. And when the horse was in the cottage, it just seemed to fill the whole place. But if you know anything about horses, there were gaps underneath and gaps up above, and didn't do the job. So they had to get the horse out, and then they had to shovel out what the horse had left behind it. It wasn't going to work. The second son, James, again, good farmer. He knew what there was plenty of: hay and straw. So he filled the whole house with hay and straw right up to the roof. And that was great. But again, if you know anything about hay and straw, it settles. So there are air pockets here and patches there. And no, didn't do. Out. Everybody waited and waited because the youngest son, he was called Kieran, and none of the neighbours had ever seen him do a day's work on the farm at all, because all Kieran was interested in was music. He would be going to sessions and festivals and flas that we have in Ireland, and everybody couldn't wait to see what he would do. When he came to the house, again, we'll give you an Irish expression, he came with both arms the one length. That meant he had nothing in his hands. Both arms the one length. And he walked into the house, and again, people were peering through the windows, but he walked over to the fireplace, he took down his fiddle, he put it under his chin, he picked up his bow, and he started to play. He played jigs, he played reels, he played slow airs, he played waltzes. He played beautiful music, and the music swirled up around that whole house, and it filled every crevice in that house. And so it was Kieran who'd filled the house with one thing, just one thing, and that was music. But of course, he wasn't interested in farming, so he divided the land between his two brothers, but he kept that house as a session house, the sort of house I have here, where people come for music, for stories, and for good company. And that's the story, Fill the House. Many, many versions of that. Thank you very much. And again, I love doing really simple stories. I love people to say, oh, she's a storyteller. I could do that, right? Go ahead and do it. Because that's part of my job, is to have people coming behind me telling stories. So I absolutely love it when people want to tell a story that they've heard me tell. Now, if it's a story I've worked on for months and months and months, I don't want somebody to just take it and regurgitate it. Everybody has to put their own twist on a story. I think that's one of the most important things about storytelling. And I mentioned that when I was a wee girl, I didn't hear many traditional stories, but because we were a very bookish house, my mother was a great reader. Actually, my mummy would be 111 years old today. I just realised that this morning. I just posted a picture of her. I'm getting more like her. It's nice that I mentioned her, actually. She was a great reader. And when she was 14, she won a scholarship in England to a grammar school. And she was simply told she couldn't go. She had to stay at home, look after the younger children, but her brother George got the scholarship, and she never got over that. And so she read and read and read and read and read. And when she was 90 years old, I went online and found her favourite book. Her favourite book, which she got as a prize in school, was called In Old St. Paul's, and it was about the plague and the fire of London. I think that book cost me something like £80 at the time, probably the most I'd ever paid for a book at that stage. And you could have given her £1 million and she wouldn't have been as happy. And whenever she died, we gave that book to my daughter, who again read it, and she loves it. And hopefully it'll be passed on to somebody else in the family. So I was brought up to hear stories, and also, yeah, couldn't go to grammar school. They couldn't afford the uniform. They couldn't afford. I was just reading about that today. Somebody talking about school trips and ski trips to Switzerland. How can people afford these things when they can't afford food on the table? Anyway, so my favorite traditional story that I told was Mother Holly. And there are many, many, many versions of Mother Holly. And I'm going to try and cobble together a version that I like. Again, it's the usual thing, where in a family there might be two daughters. And again, I don't really tend to tell stories about stepsisters and so on now, but in every family, I mean, kids will say to me, which of your books do you like best? And I say, that's like asking a mother who her favourite child is. You can't say that. You have them. You have to love them all. But in some families, yes, one is often favoured against the other. So my story is about two girls, and one was the apple of her mother's eye, and she was lazy. She did nothing. The other one was, I like to think of myself, poor but honest. You know, she worked hard, and she didn't always get the reward. And one day, that first girl went down to the well, and she was sitting by the well, and she was sitting spinning, and she dropped her spindle into the well, and she thought, oh no, my mother's going to be so mad. And she did a thing which I don't recommend any of you to do, but it is a fairy tale. She jumped down, down, down into the well, and she came out in the most beautiful land. She thought, this is lovely. And she started walking along, and she heard a voice saying, Pickus, we're ripe. And there was a tree laden with apples. So she went over, held out her apron, and put the apples in the apron. And she walked along a bit further, and she said, take us out, we'll be burnt. And there was a cottage, and she smelt that lovely smell of bread baking, and she went in, and she brought out these loaves and set them on the table. And then she walked a bit further, and there was a cottage, and outside the cottage there was an old lady with hair up in a bun, big glasses, and she said, welcome, my dear. I am Mother Holly. You're welcome to stay here and help me. Well, yes, said the girl, what can I do? She brought her in, and she showed her a quilt, and she said, every day you must shake this quilt, and when you do, on earth, it will snow, and people will know all is well with Mother Holly. So the girl, being a really good girl, did that every day. But as time passed, she realised, you know, even though her mummy wasn't always kind to her and her sister wasn't always nice to her, they were her family. She said, Mother Holly, I'd like to go back to my family. She said, yes, you can do that. And she led her to a wall, and there was a secret door in the wall, and she said goodbye. And as the girl walked through the hole in the door in the wall, she was showered with gold. And as she came close to home, she heard the rooster shouting, "Cock-a-doodle-doo! Your golden girls come back to you." Well, when her mother and the sister saw this and heard the whole story, her mother said, "Right, you go and get some of that." And the sister's eyes lit up because all she could think about was gold. So she went to the well. She didn't even bother dropping a spindle. She just down, down, down she went. And she walked out in this beautiful land. Did she look at it? No, because the only thing in her head was gold. As she walked along, she heard the apples call, "Pick us, we're ripe." She thought, "I'm not dirtying my hands with apples," because the only thing in her head was gold. You're right. Take us out, we'll be burnt." There was the smell of the bread. She thought, "No, I'm not going to dirty my hands." No. And when she walked on, ignoring the bread, which was now burning, she saw the old woman, and the old woman said, "Well, yes, shake a quilt and you give me money." Mother Holly gave her a look. So she showed her what to do, shake the quilt. Everyone will know that all is well in the world. Till the first day she shook it, the second day she half shook it, the third day she thought, "Oh, I'm too tired." And people on earth were saying, "What's wrong? Do you think everything's all right with Mother Holly? I wonder what's wrong." And Mother Holly turned to the girl and said, "Time you were going home. Oh, good, to get my reward now." "You certainly do," said Mother Holly. And she brought her to the door in the wall. When she opened the wall and the girl stepped through, she was covered with sticky black tar. "Cock-a-doodle-doo," said the rooster. "Your filthy girls come back to you." And you know, that was the only reward she got, and didn't it serve her right? Now, people, you see where I get my sense of good and evil from all these stories. I mean, fairy tales. I've kissed many frogs because of fairy tales, in my time. And also, I still believe that good will triumph over evil. So that's why I love these sort of stories where the good girl gets it and the bad girl. I think that's really good. Oh, that's nice. Baba C says, "My sons would ask, who is my favourite? I'd reply, the son I'm with at the moment." That's good. I like that. That's a really nice way of putting it. Right, probably only time for, look, one quick story. I'm going to do my favourite version of my favourite story. No, I'm not. I'm going to do something completely different. I'm going to do a story in memory of the late Sheila Stewart. And this is a story, it's not a very good vegetarian story, and you can join in, you have to join in with this story, but it's a story that I would tell to certainly young teens and older teens, and I hope you'll enjoy it as well. It's a Jack tale. There was once a boy and his name was Jack. And Jack's mother said to him, "Jack, go down to the butcher shop and get some liver and kidneys." Told you it wasn't a good vegetarian story. So down he went and he got liver and kidneys. In those days, they wrapped it in white paper, then brown paper, then a bit of string. And he came back with this parcel and he's going over the bridge and he looked over at himself and he thought, "Oh, am I good looking?" And he was looking at himself so much, the parcel fell in the water. He thought, "No, what am I going to do?" And then he remembered, whenever his brother Tom would go away, he'd shout, "Tom," and Tom would come back. So he leaned over the bridge and he shouted this, "Liver and kidneys, come up." Do you people want to try that at home? 1, 2, 3, go. Liver and kidneys, come up. Unfortunately, a man was tottering down the bridge. I don't know whether he'd eaten something that didn't agree with him, drunk some, but anyway, when he heard Jack shouting, "Liver and kidneys, come up," I'm afraid to tell you he was sick. And he came over and he thumped Jack. He said, "How dare you make me sick?" Jack said, "I'm really sorry. What should I have said?" "You should have said, 'I hope it never comes up.'" Is that right? We'll try you people at home. Ready, steady, go. "I hope it never comes up." Well, that was all right. Except as he was walking home, there was a man sowing seed. In the olden days, they had the seed fiddle and they scattered the seeds. And he said, "Morning, Jack." Jack thought it'd be helpful. So what do you think he said? "I hope it never comes up." The farmer said, "Are you joking? This is seed I'm sowing for next year. You shouldn't have said that. You should have said 1 down this year, 100 down next year." Have you got that, everybody at home? Ready? 1 down this year, 100 down next year. Except his journey home took him alongside a graveyard. And there was a funeral going on and they were just lowering a coffin in when Jack helpfully said, 1 down this year, 100 down next year. They came over and they hit him. They said, "That's our great granny. She was 87. How dare you say that?" Jack said, "I'm really sorry. What should I have said?" You should have said, Lord rest her soul. Right, he said, ready, everybody? Lord rest her soul. Teenagers actually love this. So he's coming along, and who does he meet? But a man leading a cow. Morning, Jack. Jack said, Lord rest her soul. The farmer said, are you trying to be funny? This is a cow. She's actually, well, she's going to the slaughterhouse. Told you it wasn't a good vegetarian story. Oh, Jack, what should I have said? You should have said, well, she's going to be hung on a hook. Say, hang the old cow. Have you got that, everybody? Hang the old cow. So he's walking along. I have to remember what people tell me to say. But he's coming past a big building with stained glass windows and lovely music and people in hats. And there's a man at the front in a suit, and there's a woman in a lovely white dress, and there's a minister saying, if any man know of any reason why this man and this woman should not be married, and Jack shouts, hang the old cow. The bride started crying. The groom came down. He hit Jack. He said, how dare you? You're ruining the best day of our lives. I said, sorry. What should I have said? You should have said, may they live together for many years in happiness. Have you got that, everybody? May they live together for many years in happiness. Except as he was coming down the hill, they heard, help, help. And there was a horse and a cart and a farmer upside down the ditch. Jack said, may you live together for many years in happiness. That made the farmer so mad, he pulled himself out and he thumped Jack. Jack said, sorry, what should I have said? You should have said, one out, both out, meaning me and the horse. You got that? One out, both out. Except, as he was nearing home, he met an old sailor with a patch over his eye. He said, morning, Jack. Jack said, one out, both out. He said, are you talking about my eye? Boof. Jack said, no, I'm really, really sorry. It wasn't. What should I have said? You should have said, I hope it never goes out. Have you got that, everybody? I hope it never goes out. So as he's coming home, he smells smoke, he sees fire, he sees his squire's house up on fire, people are throwing buckets of water, and he thought he'd be helpful and say the right thing, and he said, I hope it never goes out. The people went mad. They picked up Jack, they just threw him towards the flames. He said, what? And he heard, help, help. It was the squire's baby daughter. Nobody had noticed her inside. Jack picked her up in his arms. He jumped out of that house. Jack saved her life. He was a hero. And all I can tell you, people, that Jack got enough money that he and his elderly mother were able to live together happily ever after. And that's a man's story called Jack and the Liver and Kidneys from the telling of the late Scottish traveller Sheila Stewart, who was again one of my favourite tellers. So I'm hoping you enjoyed sharing some stories with me tonight, or me sharing them with you, and you can share them on to somebody else. And I'm hoping that there'll be some stories you'll take away with you. Thank you very much. Oh, there's Moth and Butterfly back from Malaga. Hello, Orla.
Hi, Liz. Sorry we're late. We're glad to come in just for a little bit. Thanks a million.
Lovely vegetarian story, especially for you, Orla, especially for you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, John, for inviting me.
And thank you, Liz. That was that was such a great hour. That was like a conversation with, might have been only one person speaking, but it didn't matter. It was just like...
Is she still talking? Is she still talking?
Yeah, she's still talking. I love that bit about old people's homes. You know, all the filters have gone.
Oh, God. As I said the other day, John, and you would appreciate this, it's not that people get grumpier, it's just that grumpy people get older.
Yeah. I've met some really horrible people.
It's obviously Evita. There's Evita. Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks very much, everybody.
So that was great, Liz.
Okay.
Mate, what we got coming up? I better say what's coming up.
Better had.
Sunday, or else I'll never be forgiven. Sunday, Mike Rust is running his worldwide story round, 6 o'clock, usual business. Come in, press the gold button, tell a story, do a poem. Pretty well, anything spoken is good. And Mike would love to see more people there. So would I. And next Friday, who's next? Oh, we're going across to New Mexico. I think it's New Mexico for Bob Cunningus. And so I'm looking forward to that because we haven't seen Bob for quite a while. And be good to have him back. And so I only do 2 things because anything more is too much to remember. I tried to remember. I love that last story. If I can remember the sequence, which
It'll be online. It'll be online. You can go back and listen to it again.
yeah.
And well, I have Daniel Morden, storyteller, staying here, and he's making my dinner, so I'm going to go in and have that now. It's wonderful. While I'm working, he's
Well,
cooking. So
give Daniel my best, will
I
you?
will, surely. He's been here all week. It's been great. Anyway, thank you, everybody.
Okay, fantastic.
Bye bye, one and all. Nice
And
to see
thank
you
you,
all.
Willie, for flying the magic carpet as always.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, everybody who tuned in from far away. Thanks very much indeed. That's Owen. There's Owen in Canada. Oh, my goodness. Hello. Great. Wonderful. All the best, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
To be continued. Hey, Vita.
Here we go. I've managed to unmute myself. I've passed on the grandchild. We're taking it in turns. We have a colicky one.
Wow. I hope you get a chance, not to be indelicate, but I hope you get a chance to do a audio version of the story you share with me in Marrakech.
Yes, I will. I will. As
All
soon
right.
as we've got time to scratch ourselves, we also moved house. So you can imagine a toddler, a colicky newborn, a moving house in winter.
I can imagine. Trust me, I can imagine. You know.
But at the same time, have a hilarious story that when I walk my grandson, sometimes when I tell him a story, he's 6 weeks old, he'll actually stop and look at me. So it's got a lot of little ditties. One day I'll share it with all of you. It's got burps and farts and poos in it, you could imagine. But he loves it. He loves it, the repeat. I think it's the repeat and the rocking.
Well, we're going to get cut off any second now. I just wanted to give a quick shout out. Also,
Okay, thank you.
Olman, hope I said that correctly. And everybody, fantastic Friday. It's still lunchtime, my side.